I'm Katie Caron, and thank you so much for joining my artist studio.
I mean, I do think that to have a fantasy or to use your imagination, it has to be grounded in reality to a certain extent. I think fantasy and reality are linked in visual art, and so if it was pure fantasy with nothing tied to our world, it would almost be hard to kind of feel like you're a part of it. And so having it tied to our reality, I think, is what allows you to enter the space or enter the piece.
It allows it to be more like relatable, and then change your perception as you view it and experience
Exactly.
it.
And I think a lot of science fiction does that. It takes where we are right now in our culture, and it extends, it predicts or extends into the future what might become or what might be, but it's still tied to the present in some way.
That's very interesting.
I mean, the cabinets of curiosity were there, like you said, to sort of, maybe engage the viewer in a, whoa, that's really disturbing, creepy way, to kind of draw them in. But then what they are is they're learning something about their world. They're becoming more worldly by experiencing these wonder rooms or these cabinets. And so I hope that with my installations and my work, I can draw the viewer in through a state of wonder, possibly, and then they spend a little bit more time with the work. Like, how do you get a viewer to spend the same amount of time with a piece of artwork as they would with a film or an animation? And it's the same as, when viewers go to the museum, the science museum, how long do they really stay with an exhibit? And so it's almost a manipulation of the viewer. Like, here, this is something that will draw you in. Okay, now this is what it's really about.
And that invites them to be curious and trying to figure out what the message is.
Yeah, I do think that by displacing the viewer with whether, I use a lot of mirrored mylar or just light or modular multiples of complex systems, that it's almost like the viewer can't take it in with a quick glance. They have to spend a little bit more time with the piece to even understand what it is that they're looking at. And so that allows them to sit with the piece just a little bit longer than maybe they would normally.
Would you say that fear and wonder are related to each other?
Definitely. I think part of the cabinets of curiosity, some of the things that were part of those spaces were disturbing and unsettling because, inside the human body, we don't see what's inside of us, and so showing that to the viewer is disturbing because it's a little bit of an unknown, but it's still connected to ourselves.
Yeah.
And so this idea of the uncanny or something that we're afraid of, it's actually something that's quite close to you, but is sort of altered in some way. And so I do think that wonder and fear are related. Fear being a visceral response to something. Wonder also being a visceral response to something.
Can a microcosm be used to describe an event so catastrophic that it's difficult to comprehend? Radioactive fallout, that there's a way to condense them down and create a miniature environment which is representative of that larger-than-life environment.
I think that question is it's a good one, and I don't think it can. I mean, those sort of events, they're just so dramatic and personal and severe. I do think that it is hard to use artifice to really communicate those sort of real life events, and I compare it to the film industry that does try to use their medium to allow the viewer to enter into these moments of utter catastrophe and despair or whatnot. And I think the films do a very good job of it, but there's still a disconnect. You're not actually there. But I think that's part of escapism as well, is that we're trying to live our lives maybe passively through watching or experiencing these things to help us understand and cope with things that we haven't experienced. Yeah, my favorite poet is Yeats.
Cool.
And one of my favorite lines from one of his poems talks about terrible beauty. And I feel that terrible beauty has been a part of my work from the beginning, even before the work was dealing more with larger concepts. It was kind of pairing what seems to be beautiful with something that's also harsh or dangerous or uncanny or disturbing. And I do think by kind of overlapping those two ideas, I can't help it. It's just the way my work is, and it possibly has to do with who I am as a person. Like, I tend to obsess on the dark things, the larger dark things that are happening to our natural world, and it's possible that that's because I'm a product of the 80s, and I spent a lot of time, with Earth Day, and growing up feeling like we're killing our environment, and maybe that's a little bit a part of it as well. But I do have this great connection to the natural world. It's a place that I find to be a place of peace and a place of inspiration, and at the same time, I find it quite disturbing what man continues to do with the natural environment, and so it's a terrible beauty that's occurring, and so I think it just kind of comes into the work that I make. How we are affecting the natural world, which we are so dependent on. The natural world will adapt and heal itself over time.
One hopes.
But not in my lifetime, and not in my children's lifetime or my grandchildren's lifetime. So I think it's a larger question of, can we learn to adapt with nature, or are we going to just continue, consuming nature the way we are, to the point where nature cannot sustain us anymore? And I think that's the bigger issue that concerns me.